been a bit of a theme going on down at the clinic this week.
There's a lot of it about, and a lot of people,
Yeah.
I think men more than women, not talk about it.
Men are really starting to talk about it, thank goodness. In fact, our newsletter this week happened to be on depression in men and why. It did actually, sort of quinkadinkly. Anyway, so there's so many reasons for it, and I know that a lot of people probably just feel fatigued and exhausted, and that can then lead to depression because what's the point in going on when you're tired all the time? You know, there can be, but that real...
Is that a sign?
It really is.
Not wanting to get out of bed?
Yeah. And sometimes people will get to that spot where they get out, they do the absolute minimum, and then they crawl back into bed for the rest of the day and just can't quite make themselves get going.
Motivated.
Yeah, it's almost better when people have to do stuff. But, you know, when people are in a bad space, depression can be so nasty for some people that the world just passes them by and they're aware of it, but there's nothing they can do about it. And there's so much linked in with it, like chronic fatigue and depression are very linked. I think we've chatted about that before.
Indeed, yeah.
And also chronic pain, but you can have depression just purely on its own. And everyone sort of knows about those hormones, the things like serotonin and dopamine that are linked in depression, but they're only such a small part of the equation because serotonin is only 1% of the neurotransmitters in the brain.
Well, to produce more serotonin, get out and walk.
Yeah.
Get out and see the sunshine.
Exercise gets dopamine going and serotonin to a certain extent, but you absolutely need things like vitamin D and tryptophan. You know, there's nutrients that you need to make serotonin. So just for a second, you know, when you hear people talking about a chemical imbalance and therefore they go on the medications because they've got a chemical imbalance, you have to remember these chemicals are made of food from what we eat. We're supposed to make these neurotransmitters.
Naturally.
Yeah, so serotonin is made from things like tryptophan and tyrosine and B vitamins, and you know they're nutrients that should be in our diet, and that's part of the problem these days.
So much goes back to what we're putting in our mouth.
I know, and it really is something that everyone knows, but people don't want to change because it's the type of thing where when it comes back to our diet, which is easier to go take a little, you know, blue pill from the doctor or to
That's
change
right.
the
And
diet and start
keep
making
eating
lifestyle.
the junk food, yeah.
Exactly. Because what happens when we have high sugar, the combination of bad fats and sugar, so the bad, and by bad fats, obviously, I'm talking about things like the combination of stuff like pizzas and sugars and that type of
we're
thing.
not talking about the little bit of fat that is on a lamb.
No,
chop,
we're really not.
Or a little bit of marbled steak.
No,
That's the good
absolutely
stuff.
not. And even things like avocados and nuts and seeds and that sort of thing. No, we're talking about the combination that's in our fast food that makes that combination of sugar or carbohydrates plus the fats just evil to our nervous
They've
system.
been technically tampered with.
They really have
and
been.
our bodies can't recognise the substance that we eat.
Yeah, and so the amount that our body can metabolize in any stage is 2 fistfuls. So when you make fists with your hands and you put them together, that's the size of our stomach, 2 fists together. Yep, so your stomach's bigger than my stomach.
Yours. Dainty little thing.
So that's the amount your body can metabolize. So when we eat more than that, and I'm not talking green leafy veggies, we can eat that till the cows come home, but I'm talking about food, you know, that
Red meats.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Things like cheeses and, you know, and nuts and seeds and all sorts of things. When you start eating too much, your body can't break it down properly.
I can remember going to a restaurant in Racecourse Road, very well known restaurant, been there for many, many years, and a young lady took me there for my birthday, and I ordered a rib steak.
Yep.
Now, without word of a lie, the waiter said, "Oh, sir, you won't be able to eat that. It's too big for you, sir." This is about 12 years ago. He said, "We had the rugby union team, the Australian Wallabies then, and some of those boys couldn't take the whole steak." Well, I ate the whole lot, but afterwards, I could have just laid down and died.
Yeah, right.
I just felt so
So it was a big
heavy.
steak?
It was huge, big as the
Yeah.
plate, and the salad was on a side plate.
Wow.
But I got through it. I proved a point. Didn't feel well afterwards.
You're no quitter.
With depression in guys, and look, girls, we're not forgetting you, because everyone can suffer depression, and a lot of people do. There are 12 indications. Do you want to run through those with me?
Yeah. So things like exhaustion is one thing. So basically, that's fairly important to make sure that. Yeah, it's fairly important to make sure that you've got the energy you need. But then you've got to find out why you're exhausted. You know, so even taking a good old multivitamin doesn't cost you a lot. And people complain about the yellow pee and that sort of, you know, from taking a multivitamin.
Oh, well, Barocca.
my perspective, you are much better off having an insurance policy that costs you 50 cents a day or something like that as a multivitamin, because you're getting so many things in it than missing out on nutrients that are creating neurotransmitters in your brain. It's common sense. They've actually found that even things like heart attacks reduced by 6 times just by taking a multivitamin a day. So, multivitamins, start boosting your energy naturally. Lack of sleep. That's a really big thing when people aren't sleeping very well.
See, I go to sleep and I've got witnesses. I can put my head down on the pillow, and within, I'd say, 2 minutes, I'm out.
Yeah, right.
Yet I'll get up 5 o'clock when the sun rises.
Yeah.
I'm very, very lucky.
You are very lucky. Because I think even medically, they consider it normal as we get older to wake up the number of times per night of decades that we've lived.
Is that right?
Yeah, so when you're 40, they almost expect you to wake up 4 times a night, 55 times a night, 66 times a night.
55 times, I'd be worried about my prostate. I was getting up 5 times
Well,
a night.
exactly. Well, that's the thing. I think it's just because something's normal doesn't make it good.
So
So that's sort of like, medically they don't worry about it too much if you're approximately within that range.
If you're over the hill, you're looking at me again. So that's exhaustion.
Yes.
Lack of sleep, quality sleep.
Yes.
Not sleep apnea. We're not talking about that.
Well, that doesn't help either. If you've got sleep
it's a
apnea,
shocker.
you're going to end up with lack of oxygen to the brain.
Who was the girl that was in Star Wars who died recently?
Yes.
Carrie Fisher.
Yeah.
Now, admittedly, she had some toxins in her system through certain parties she was attending, but sleep apnea was also put down as a cause.
And she had a big history of heart problems.
Yeah, well, sleep apnea will bring about heart problems.
Yeah, and you sort of looked at her over the years. She did she did struggle with weight issues. So Carrie, and it was a lot around the midsection. So, that is one of those risk factors for sleep apnea and heart issues and diabetes and that sort of thing.
That's spare tire.
Yeah, it doesn't help.
Exhaustion, sleep, another one.
Low libido. So a lot of times people will look at...
I had that until you walked in.
So libido issues is a bit of a sign because it means low testosterone.
Yeah.
And if you think about the fight and flight stuff going on in the body, if your body thinks you're about to get eaten by a tiger, does it matter if you're procreating next week and having more babies? So therefore,
it's a good way to go out, isn't it?
it is. So the survival stuff can actually shut down testosterone, and we need a lot of nutrients to keep our libido going. But your body will just sort of switch that off if it does not deem that it's important. And it's a bit of a thing, I sort of, when I'm treating men or women in a couple, and quite often, you'll be working on one of the partners for 6 months and their libido's, through the roof, and then the other one starts
Drops
coming
off.
there. Yeah, and then you go, time for him to come along and see you, I think.
So, libido, another one. Now, we've got 12 indications, but I haven't got them in front of me.
So there's things like anxiety as well. So even though that isn't exactly depression, anxiety can lead to depression because it's exhausting for the nervous system. So anxiety will burn your vitamins, your magnesium, your calcium, potassium faster than it...
And leaves you drained.
It really does leave you drained.
What about thyroid?
Oh, thyroid issues, that's a big one. So basically low thyroid can feel exactly the same as depression and vice versa. And once again, it takes a long time for thyroid issues to show up in the blood tests. So people can be feeling quite depressed, but it can take 5-10 years for the thyroid stimulating hormone to be either too high or too low so that it's found medically.
It's all about a balance.
It really is.
We talk about every week balance.
Yeah,
in everything
that's
we do.
right.
Look, they're just some of the examples that will indicate whether you might be suffering depression. Now, to go along to your staff and yourself at New Leaf Natural Therapies,
yes,
and the address is 94 Edith Street, Wynnum, you can do simple tests, can't you, on certain aspects there to pinpoint a problem.
Yeah, so when I think about depression and what sort of tests, firstly, if someone's overweight, I would want to look at the bioimpedance screening and have a look at what the body composition is doing, because in order to make hormones, you need to have... hormones are made from fats and proteins. So therefore, if we do a body composition and we're finding you're low in muscle mass or low in muscle quality, then basically your body might not have the core key factors it needs in order to make these hormones. So someone who's really underweight, for example, or really overweight, because it can be exactly the same problem, believe it or not, that can actually lead to low hormones. High cholesterol is another thing. I think we've chatted about cholesterol before. Every single hormone that you make in the body requires cholesterol as the backbone. So it doesn't matter whether you're trying to make serotonin or dopamine or testosterone or estrogen. You need good levels of good fats in the diet.
Before, don't try and knock cholesterol totally out of your body because you need it to live.
Yeah, and I've actually seen men come in with their test from the doctors where their doctors go, oh, you're fantastic, your cholesterol's 2.5. And I go, oh my God, your cholesterol's 2.5? Because with it being so low, it means you can't be making testosterone and adrenaline and you can't be making hormones very well. So therefore, it's too low. And so your body simply can't be making those hormones.
Can that have a reflection on your mental state, depression?
Oh, without a doubt. So the longer we are depressed, especially when it comes to antidepressants, and I know I've mentioned this before, but I will certainly mention it again now. The studies are indicating that for every year we are on antidepressants, we shrink the brain by 5%. So they have found that for basically it's about a 20-year trajectory from going from antidepressants. If we stay on them for 20 years, we have a massive, massive, massive risk of dementia.
There are a lot of young people, and I know for a fact, I remember a school teacher, can't mention the school, in fact I can't even remember it now, but these young ladies, school students, probably about 15, 16 years of age, off on an excursion to New Zealand, and the particular teacher said to me, Roger, medications, are they safe in the suitcase or should they be with the cabin baggage? And I said, oh, cabin baggage, anything like that goes in the cabin bag.
Yeah.
And I said, have you got a few on medications? Oh, yes, he said, quite a few of them are on antidepressants. Now, these are kids.
Yeah.
Frightening.
It is.
I couldn't believe it.
And people get so... Well, funnily enough, I think we've chatted about this before as well. Addiction isn't the word because the medical definition of dictionary is that you need the substance more often and with higher doses. So technically, most people aren't addicted to their medications. But what ends up happening is that when they start going off their antidepressants or antipsychotics or anti-anxiety drugs.
The old marijuana, what about that? People who... they're cool, they're in their teens and they smoke a joint now and again, they smoke a bit more when they leave school, and then they want to stop.
Yes. Yeah, I think...
Is there a risk of depression kicking in?
Well, that causes like a low-level depression anyway. Like marijuana doesn't, that tends to calm people's moods down, so people use it for things like anxiety. I don't know how it affects serotonin, but one of the big things that I find with kinesiology is that marijuana shuts down the logical hemisphere in the brain. And the longer we take pot, the more likely we are to have, this sounds sort of cool, it's double gestalt in the brain, which means we have creativity running on both sides of the brain instead of logic.
So therefore...
Yeah, so these people think that they're, and when people are thinking, they think it's normal. Whatever their thought processes is at any time, that's normal for them. So you can't sort of pick on them about this because whatever people are saying, it's normal in their brain. But what ends up happening is they lose the ability to think logically. So because they're thinking creatively, they're coming up with all sorts of weird and wonderful solutions that someone with a logical brain wouldn't agree.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the main things that it does. And unlike things like ice and meth and stuff like that actually really shrinks the brain and causes, the pitting and all sorts of stuff. Marijuana doesn't seem to do that, but it definitely can lead to depression and schizophrenia if you've got that's one of the big things with pot particularly is that schizophrenia and the paranoia, like you say.
Yeah. All right, that's, you can avoid... going down that road if you don't indulge in those horrible things. What about anger and hostility?
Oh man, because people don't realise that they're very much two and the same. So there's this thing called the grief gauge that counsellors sort of talk about, and the grief gauge is where something happens and then we sort of move on through life and we adapt and then eventually we get over it. Or we don't. So anger is one of those things that once we suppress anger and we haven't got over something, depression is really considered internalized anger. So because we're either angry at ourselves that we haven't stood up for ourselves, or angry at our parents for not having done something for us, or, so anger can really internalize, and basically it and depression are very much.
I imagine those going through separation, divorce, prime candidates for such... feelings, anger, irritability. and feeling glum.
Yeah.
And some people cannot climb out of that dark tunnel.
And I think it's one of those things when we're doing kinesiology and counselling with clients, quite often we're finding that many people, and this isn't just women or men, it's sort of everyone across the board, many people have never been asked, what do you do for you in your life? Or what is your passion? What do you want to be doing in 10 years? And, you know, the amount of times that question makes people cry or say, oh my God, no one has never asked me that.
They've tried to follow the norm, what their parents have
absolutely
tried to direct them in, and
they've just been doing what they've been doing forever and haven't thought about themselves, you know, or they've done the whole having kids and, you know, they're on that sort of pathway.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? When you get married, people, you're going out with a girl, or in your case, going out with a boy. A lot of people say, oh, well, you've been going out with them for 2 years. Aren't you going to get married?
Yeah.
That's one little demand that society puts on you. Then you get married, and then they're very quick to say, oh, when are you going to start a family?
Exactly.
Demand, demand, demand. And
yeah.
A lot of people, of course, can't handle that, and things go bad.
Yeah, and I think that amount of pressure, because people don't have, that's a great thing, I think, these days. People don't have to do anything, but just because you don't have to doesn't mean your family and friends aren't going to hassle the heck out of you until, you know,
look,
you follow the social norms.
If you know someone who you suspect could be suffering depression, put them on to New Leaf Natural Therapies. The staff there, they're professionals, they know what they're talking about. The telephone number is 33486098. Or if you like to drop in, maybe you yourself are feeling a little bit glum too often. The address, 94 Edith Street, Wynnum. Madonna and the team there will be more than happy to do whatever is necessary as far as tests go, and direct you in the right direction.
Yeah,
put you in the right direction, I should say.
Yeah.
So that's irritability, sleeping too much, fatigue, chronic pain, that can bring about, I've got a mate who had severe back injury through an accident, and he went through depression. He's good as gold today, but for quite a few years he suffered.
Yeah, the amount of my client, do you know the average amount of time that a doctor talks to someone before being offered antidepressants is 4 minutes? Yeah. Like they are just offered these days so quickly.
Oh, it's the same thing. Look, what's making the papers every day at the moment, overuse in Australia of antibiotics.
Yeah.
They're so quick to subscribe them to a patient, get them out the door, next please.
Exactly, and even for things like the flu, which is a virus, which antibiotics don't do anything for, but people still want their script. We're in a very interesting age, but the doctors are the ones who really have to say, this isn't going to do anything for you, but instead they're just keeping people happy and writing the scripts.
I had a friend who travelled frequently overseas, that was his job. And he would always carry, I don't know what they were, but certain antibiotics prescribed by the doctor.
Yeah.
And he would carry them just in case he was on the other side of the world and felt a sniffle coming on.
Yeah.
And he would swear by it. But of course, his immunity would be affected by that because he would have been taking them over a 30-year period. Yeah,
and the people who we see often with really poor immunity are the ones who have done lots of travel in third world countries and have had lots of vaccines beforehand, had lots of medications while they've been over there because they've ended up with some belly bug. And you know, I was even chatting to someone this morning, it's so hard to get good natural stuff overseas. When I was in Europe a few years ago, Jason and I got a bit of the snuffles. We'd been having a great time for a few weeks. Obviously lowered our immunity. And
substance abuse.
Just a little bit. And I could not even get a vitamin C without aspartame in it.
What's that?
You know, aspartame, it's the artificial sweetener that's in, diet soft drinks, and it's a neurotoxin. Yeah, it's a neurotoxin. I could not find a vitamin C without aspartame in it. And then when I finally found one little herbal combo that I thought, well, they're really poor doses, like they were so crap compared to what I do. But it was sort of like, okay, and I pretty much had to have a bottle every day just to have a therapeutic dose. But you couldn't buy more than one at a time. You know, they've got all these ridiculous laws where I don't know why. But it was just one of those things where I was just going from chemist to chemist to buy one at a time.
So many things that we're
they were so sweet.
Hey, just changing the subject a bit, I read in the paper today, toxic fears from e-cigarettes. Now, I noticed in Belgium and Germany that people are smoking e-cigarettes left, right and centre. If you're not sure of e-cigarettes, if you're a bit like me, dated, they're not a true cigarette with tobacco, they're electronic, aren't they?
Yes. And I've actually had a couple of people have almost like psychotic episodes.
With it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they say non-vaping customers in pubs or confined areas can be exposed to unhealthy levels of formaldehyde, which causes cancer and other bad effects, a toxin that irritates the eyes, the skin. So we've gone from one evil, as we used to call coffin nails, cigarettes, to these e-cigarettes. And look, if you're going to give up smoking, why not drop in and see the people in New Leaf?
There's got to be something else, you know.
Chew a chocolate. I know it's sugar, but it's got to be better than that. But I look at these people with these cigarettes, and I used to always say, why are they going from tobacco, which is bad enough, to a substitute? Because your lungs aren't built to take in these fumes.
No,
anyway,
they're not. They're not.
We've nearly run out of time, Madonna. What else can you tell me that's happening down there the past week and the coming week?
Well, I suppose once again, our new lady Kat, the musculoskeletal therapist, kinesiologist, she's pretty much booked up the following week, but she's fantastic, and we're loving having her back in the team. I suppose I just always think, give us a ring and sort of see what we can do for you. We've sort of Rob and Georgia, both also do some really good stuff for
Georgia's
depression as well.
fantastic.
And she does some really nice and for just sort of, I mentioned the side effects of the drugs before. Don't forget there's natural things that you can do to boost your energy and boost your mind and to boost your brain.
If only you can force yourself to get up and go out. Look, a day like today, okay, a little windy, but it's not bitterly cold.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Go for a walk. It's beautiful, and that serotonin will kick in. You will feel a bit better. And while you're out walking, especially around Wynnum Way, drop into New Leaf Natural Therapies at 94 Edith Street, Wynnum, and the telephone number, Madonna, is
3348 6098.
Okay, well, you've got your own program
coming up at the end of August.
Be a lot of fun. Thanks, we'll see you next Friday.
Excellent. Thanks, Roger.